Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good night, depending on where you are. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, a show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives from the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Michael Walsh, who's the Senior Director of Global Talent Management and Organisational Effectiveness at Eaton. Welcome to the show, Michael. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Yeah, sure. So right out of graduate school, I got my master's degree in HR. Right out of graduate school, I did several years in consulting, so HR strategy and analytics consulting. Spent some time in Chicago, then packed up all my stuff, moved to Dubai for a few years, then back to the States and in New York, where I left the consulting realm and went internal, started doing started and led a people analytics function at Bloomberg. And then my wife and I decided to move to Michigan, which is where we are now. And so I went into a talent management type role, so expanded my breadth of experience there, doing talent management, not just analytics, but also talent management. And then that was at Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. They then decided to start a people analytics function, so I led that and started that there as well. And now I work at Eaton doing, again, a broad talent management role. Personally, I'm married, have a 3-year-old daughter, just turned 3 this past Saturday. So we had a quarantine birthday, and have a brand new son who was born in March. So
fantastic. Before we jump in further, your camera seems to be shaking a bit. And I don't know if you're like leaning on the desk at all, but the camera's shaking on our end.
Okay. I'll sit back.
Just in case you're leaning on the desk,
yeah.
Maybe it's me on my end. But what an incredible story! And because you were in you were focused on people analytics, before it was sexy.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to be.
Was talking about it.
Exactly. And along the way, got my PhD as well in industrial organizational psychology. So have really been able to immediately apply the things that we learned. And it was, when I was in Dubai and even before, it was really kind of a boom time for when people really started talking about it. And it's fun to see the discipline evolve over time.
Mm-hmm. So is that part of your role now? Obviously, Director of Global Talent Management. Is it you still looking after the HR analytics, or is it specifically more around talent analytics?
Well, so we have a centralized function that does this is what they do all day, every day. But I certainly do these kinds of things in my day-to-day role as well, and absolutely lead with an analytics kind of focus. And actually, you had our head of analytics, Wendy on when you did your
she's amazing, by the way.
Panel. Oh, she's incredible, absolutely incredible.
I didn't even make the connection. I'm so because it was only after I was like, oh my god, I spoke with Michael. That's Wendy. Oh, so
yeah. Well, we actually our paths started crossed in consulting. We both worked at Mercer at the same time.
Oh, of course.
So we knew each other in a past life, and now we're both at Eaton. And so she's leading the people analytics from an overall Eaton perspective. I'm doing talent management, so we're very much connected, and we love doing projects together because we speak the same language and I know the project steps that she's going to take and the things that she's going to do, and it's just a really great relationship. So those things fall under my purview as well.
Nice. Starting out as a predominantly a generalist, what attracted you to the people analytics side? Do you saw that this is the future of where our profession is going early on, and thought, let me make sure I develop myself to prepare? Was you just you saw that early on? What was it that attracted you to it?
It was really a personal interest. I mean, I probably shouldn't admit this in such a big audience, but I really wasn't that good at math in school.
I got a D in school at math, so I know about that.
But when you do analytics, and it's a lot of the advanced analytics is statistics, which is a bit math, but it's a lot of art, and it's a lot about how you set up the project and what questions you're trying to answer, and all these kinds of things. And I saw the power of analytics in the people related space, and it just took off from there. My interest just grew and grew and grew, and I just kind of self-taught everything I know, and how to work in R and SPSS and things I learned in school. But a lot of these things there's just because I was interested and read up on it.
Well, it was a good job you were interested. It paid off.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Who would have thought that 2 weeks ago that we had nearly 5,000
It's incredible.
people analytics and talent analytics professionals join us for that summit, right, with Wendy as well.
Incredible, yeah.
Like, if you told me that 7, 8 years ago when I started this work, I was like, you're crazy.
Yeah. No, congrats. That's amazing.
It was like personnel.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Well, and the thing is, we sit on so much data. We collect so much data, but nobody was doing anything with it. And I actually think today that people don't know exactly what to do with a lot of it. And it's just, there's so much more that we can be doing in this space. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, people analytics, it means a lot to different people, to different things to different people. How do you describe people analytics?
Yeah, I think if you ask 10 people, here's this for good math. If you ask 10 people, you probably get 12 different answers, right? So to me, I think it's all about helping the business make better business decisions. Which sounds cliche, and it is, but it's all about figuring out what data you have in the first place, which of those data are good data that you can actually use, and then it's figuring out testing hypotheses. It's all about the scientific method at the end of the day, and testing hypotheses, figuring out what are the right questions, what are the things that we're going to solve for, what things can we solve for. And I think a lot of when people think about people analytics, they think about those aha, big picture kind of, oh my goodness, I had no idea that people weren't leaving for compensation. It was actually their manager, and thank you for helping me do that. And oftentimes in people analytics, we confirm hypotheses that people have already had in their minds. They just haven't had an opportunity.
Now you've got the data to back it up.
Yeah, exactly. And so anytime
you got the data to disprove.
Exactly right. Yeah, and that's really what it's all about, is the discovery. And as with academic discovery and scientific discovery, you're going to figure out so many more things on your journey to the end, as opposed to getting to that end goal. So it's and that's the fun part, to be honest with you, is the back and forth with the business, and testing those hypotheses, making sure that we're on the right track. And you do get those aha kind of golden nugget moments, but oftentimes you don't, and you have to be okay with that too.
That's what part of the process.
Yeah, exactly right.
One of the big questions we always get from our members and audience is, where do we start?
Yeah.
What's your advice? Specifically, let's talk about people and talent analytics, as this is obviously the focus of the show. Where do you recommend people start? How do they get started?
Yeah, I think even as you look across HR as a discipline as a whole, we're not known for the most analytical minds, right? We're known as, quote, people, which I really don't like that phrase, but that's kind of how it's known. And so I think start with the basics. If you can take a decent story to a business leader that's based in even things like counts or averages or the basic kind of stuff, you're going to start to move the needle. I think a lot of companies, when they start analytics functions, expect to go from 0 to 120, and they say, okay, we want the predictive stuff. How do we get the predictive stuff? I want to predict turnover. I want to predict, hiring.
You haven't even sorted out your data yet.
Yeah, exactly right. We don't even know what these data fields mean, let alone.
Is it even clean? Or is it
exactly? Yeah, and so many people, especially in the field, when they're entering data into those systems that we use for our analysis, they use different fields to mean different things. So they may, put highest academic achievement. They may be using that field for, I don't know, zip code or something, right? So it may not even make any sense at all. And so we've got to go through and make sure that we've got all those things right before we jump to those predictive things. But that said, everything you do should be in the spirit of that same journey, getting to that end. And so if you can start to clean your data through smaller projects and easier things to do, even just presenting turnover trends and the reasons why you think that might be happening through some qualitative data analysis can be really, really helpful and really beneficial to the organization.
Yeah. But it's important though, right, to focus on just one thing or one or two things that are going to have the most impact for the business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I've started the couple functions that I have, the very first thing I do is send out a survey, not to HR leaders. I mean, they're included as well, but also to business leaders to say, what are the things that keep you up at night, and where can we make the most impact as an analytics function? And so gathering that input directly from business leaders, and then following that up with interviews and things, just to set the groundwork of, look, it works two ways, right? So that gives me more information on where I can be successful, but it also provides me the opportunity to level set with these people to say, we're not going to jump to predictive analytics if we're not ready. And I'll let you know when we're ready, because look, those are the things I'm excited about too, but let's take smaller steps to get to where we need to be before that.
Yeah. Well, part of that process is managing expectations.
Oh, it's a huge part of the process.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we launched the people analytics function doesn't mean we're all going to be, wizards in the next few weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Challenge.
Well, and the hardest part is to teach that kind of influence and those kinds of things with people who are just starting an analytics function. And it's really, I can teach somebody technical skills in R. I can teach somebody technical skills in Excel or SPSS or whatever it might be. But getting to understand those influencing skills, those consulting type skills, how to listen, how to really translate what somebody says from a business perspective into a viable project that you can.
Storytelling, right? Biggest skill, one of the biggest skills for people analytics professionals coming up, which is some of the areas that they struggle with the most.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I've seen that a lot. One thing that shocked me in the beginning is that many of the people analytics leaders I was speaking to actually weren't the ones doing the technical work, and really they were translating the work they were doing with their team to the business, and that was a very different set of skills. And I was like, oh, okay. So because I just expected them to be very analytical and very in the data, whereas I realized that actually is obviously they need to have an understanding and some knowledge to be able to do the work, but in reality many of them were chosen for that role for that storytelling capability and translating from both communicating, almost like a business partner role between the two parts of the business.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I actually teach master's level HR students at a university here in Detroit. And that's one of the things that we cover in my class, which is how to tell a story with data. And it's fine to come up with the prettiest charts and graphs and all these kinds of things, but if it doesn't tell a story, and if you can't translate that into what the business actually needs, you're never going to be asked to tell another story again, or to come back into, and one of the things that I tell them is we've got to treat this almost like a movie and storyboard what we're going to do, right? There's an introduction, there's a kind of climax where everything happens and we tell people what happened, and then we lead off with some recommendations and those kinds of things, and get out the sticky notes, put them on your whiteboard, however you can do it, is what I tell all my students.
Yeah. When you go to those leaders and you've started multiple people analytics functions now, and you send that survey, what's the most common responses you get?
That's a good one. It really depends on the cycle in which the business falls at that time, I've noticed. So a lot of people, if you're in growth mode, people say recruiting. How do we get better people? If you're in kind of maintenance mode and you're having a lot of turnover's pretty typical.
Yeah, so really, it's very dependent on where the business is.
Yeah, one of the coolest projects I did was predictive succession planning. And so we were able to, we had this annual process where we went through and did succession planning for our senior executives, and we were able to do a predictive model based on previous attributes and those kinds of things, and the drivers of someone being on a succession plan, which was really kind of neat because we were able to dip our toe into analytics in an area where a lot of people don't go, because people talk about recruiting analytics and turnover analytics. Those are the basics when it comes to predictive analytics. But this was able to allow us to then assign a % probability to each person who could potentially be on a plan. But the cool part about that was, not only are we not starting from a blank slate from succession planning perspective, but we're able to talk about why is this person's percentage not higher, and then get into how are we how are we going to develop this person in order to get them to a place where we would be comfortable putting them on a succession plan. And so the art of statistics, naturally we're going to have some error built into our models, and in this case that was a really good thing, because we could have those conversations about the people, that would help to get them to where they wanted to be from a career perspective.
Yeah, that's also something that I love when I first started talking about this topic, is multiple models that you build can be used to measure different things. Like you just, perfect example of what you just said there. You could actually see, oh, actually this is identified that these people that we need to spend more time with training, developing, etc.
Yeah.
You didn't go in the beginning to get that insight,
Right.
coming out of it, but that came out of the process.
Yeah, exactly.
As well. In terms of the relationship with you and the partners, this is also a big challenge for a lot of the people I speak to every day. Is this every day there's a new vendor popping up claiming to be the best, and they throw around words like AI and predictive, prescriptive, and machine learning. And then because I speak to a lot of those guys, and when you really dive into it, peel back the curtain, you know,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, that's AI. What kind of questions do you ask? So for someone listening, they want to, they're looking for a new particular technology or platform. What are some of the questions that you typically ask vendors when you're deciding whether you're going to choose that vendor? Some core questions to make sure you're going to be a good fit.
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is one of my soapbox topics, because I think as HR professionals, we often do deal with vendors in this space, and especially the newer vendors who are coming out with things like AI and these kinds of things. And I think some of those vendors, I'll preface this conversation with, some of those vendors are great and have good products, but one of the things that I very first ask for is the technical manual for their solution. Ooh. Which outlines everything that they've done to validate what they did. It talks about the studies that they've done in order to make sure that what they're measuring actually does lead to better performance on the job. It talks about everything that they've done, and you would be shocked with the number of vendors who cannot produce a technical manual.
I would never have thought to ask that question, by the way.
Oh, yeah. So if they can't produce it, run far and run fast, because that is number one. Because let's take a hiring vendor X, whatever it may be, who's using artificial intelligence, and they say that they can predict performance on the job and screen out your candidates. Well, if they have never done a study to show that the things that they're measuring through their process actually lead to better performance on the job, then you're just basing what you're doing on chance.
You're just winging it.
yeah, exactly right.
Like a formal study, right? Like a formal study they can send you, with the data, with the insights.
Exactly. Well, and then the second question I ask is, let's say that they've gone through all of that background analysis, and they've done their due diligence and their homework. We've got to do that in our organization as well. We have to validate that, because these results can vary based on things like organizational culture. Just because a hiring assessment works in one organization does not mean that it will work in ours. And so we have to be able to run whatever selection method they're running and collect data along the way and do a study at the end of that to say, okay, does this actually predict better performance on the job?
And so do you do that before you even partner with them?
We make sure that we're able to do a study like that and collect the data. Yeah, they probably would never sign up to do that before you actually bring them into your organization, but just making sure that there are plans in place to do that validation study.
Yeah, before. Okay. Yeah. So if you don't get past that first stage, that's it. There's
no further questions.
All the vendors listening right now, they're like, okay.
when we present to this guy, make sure we put together a technical manual before we get into our
make sure. What's next after that? Because if they pass that test, what kind of the other sort of probing questions, open questions that you ask to gather more data to say, is this a good fit for us?
So
in terms of from a technical point of view, from a cultural point of view, the integration point of view, what does that look like?
So the technical and cultural piece are intermixed in my mind when it comes to this kind of stuff, which sounds a little funny, but I'll explain. So typically, and let's stick with the example of a hiring assessment, a vendor will come in and have a specific set of competencies, let's say, that they're measuring through their process.
Yep.
And companies will have a set of competencies that they find important. Oftentimes, those competencies are not the same. And so it's really important that the vendor not have a black box that, okay, we're going to collect this data and then we're going to spit out scores for these people. Well, I want to know exactly what you're measuring, what competencies, what's the weighting of each of those competencies, And at the end of the day, can we change those competencies that you're measuring in order to measure what's important to us? And if not, I don't want to have to shoehorn in our organizational competencies or values into something that you're measuring, because it's not going to be the same and it's not going to measure the same, and we might have bad results based on that as well. So that's really, really important to get into too.
Mm-hmm. I've actually spoke to a number of CHROs, and I've said, why didn't you choose that platform? And that is their response, is that there was no flexibility to work with us.
Yes.
And to build that into their product. Almost like a must-have now. People aren't looking for off-the-shelf products.
Totally.
And that's the days of that's gone.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why a lot of the smaller startups are having so much success. Is a lot of the big players out there don't have the capability to do that and to change and adapt and work with the client. Whereas a lot of the small startups I'm seeing are having a lot of success because they're working with, not for, their clients.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's a really good point that you made there, because that's also a question that I hear come up a lot, is that capability there to work with you and adapt it, change, iterate? And if the answer is no, the conversation ends.
And this is another a bit of a plug for organizations to buy that capability internally. So if you go out and you hire someone like myself who can create these types of assessments, design these types of assessments, you can create something from scratch that is going to align with your cultural values and is going to work and things like that. So, and I get it, right? Vendors, they need to make money, and the best way to do that is to have something off the shelf that you can plug and play into multiple different places. I don't fault them at all for that kind of business model. That's how they make money. But I think the ability to work with them, and like you said, work with them, not for them, is a really, really good way to put it.
Yeah. When we last spoke, you were talking about making sure your analytics function is tapped into the business, and how in your current role you get to commission the analysis. Could you share more on that?
Absolutely. So in my current role, it's great because I see a broader perspective than just analytics. So I see the whole talent arena in my current business, and it's great because I'm not going to ask to do an analytics assignment or a project unless I know that I'm going to do something with it. Right? When I've been in analytics functions before and led those functions before,
quite frustrating for analytics functions. They're not doing work, nothing happens with it.
It really is. It was one of my biggest frustrations, and I learned this early on in my career in consulting. Right? We'd go in, we'd do a great project, we would come up with some really neat stuff, and it would sit on a shelf, and nobody would do anything with it, and that was really frustrating. Growing up, saying, "Look, I've done all this work. Why aren't you using the stuff that I did?" And so now it's really good because I can not only can I commission the analytics when I need it, but I also am sure that something's going to be done with it. So it's a win all the way around. And I'll tell you, another plug for Wendy. She is phenomenal at this, in involving the business and making sure that there are not just HR people from the business or talent people from the business involved, but also business people involved in all of these projects.
What does it look like though, Michael? How does that work? Like what is it? Just inviting them to the meetings? Is it, what does that look like for someone listening right now? How they can do that in their organization?
Yeah. So it's more than just inviting to the meetings. It's helping to get hypotheses and things to test from those people. They live it every single day. So let's use a turnover model as an example. Let's say we're going to go after a predictive turnover model. Well, I can do some analysis up front about exit surveys and see why people are saying they're leaving, that kind of thing. But it's really critical to get those business people in a room, HR and non-HR, in a room to talk about what are the things that they're experiencing? Why are they seeing people leave? What are they hearing every single day? And it's really about tapping into their expertise, because we all bring different things to the table. We all bring, I bring a talent perspective. Wendy and her team would bring an analytics perspective. The business people bring their business perspective. So it's really about getting all those voices together to figure out what are those things that are super important that we need to test, because they may come up with something that we hadn't planned on testing in our model, and we need to figure out a way to make sure that we incorporate that into what we're doing.
Do you now have a how do you balance then the models that you create that get used or don't, or do you just say we're not going to create one unless we're going to use it? Because you can't always do that. I get it, because you need to test different hypotheses to do that. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, I ask the question every single time before I start a project to whomever is kind of the project sponsor. what are you going to do with this if we confirm these hypotheses, and what are you going to do with it if we don't? So it doesn't matter if we're going to go into this with some preconceived notions, and if those are confirmed, that's great. What are we going to do about it, and what are some actions that we could do just to brainstorm together? And then if we don't confirm those things, what could we do differently? That way we're guaranteed that regardless of the outcome, we're going to be doing something differently. And it's a really good way to start to say, this is more than just analytics. This is more than just numbers. This is really a change effort. And how are we going to change the organization going forward?
Yeah, love it. Because I bet after you ask those two questions, there's probably some people are like, actually, we don't really need that.
Yeah, exactly.
Waste your time otherwise.
That's exactly right.
Those two questions, what are we going to do if we do find it or we don't? But what are you going to do with it either way? They're like, oh, actually, maybe it's not that important anymore, Michael.
It's exactly right. And a lot of people, when they find out that you have an analytics function or that you're capable of doing these kinds of things, they want to go after the things that are, they get the results back and say, oh, that's really interesting.
Oh, great. All this time.
I don't know how many times, countless times I've heard in my career, that's really interesting. And for me, that's like a death toll. Like that's it.
I'm sure
done.
So many people, analytics people or leaders like yourself can relate to that right now, listening like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. Yeah, we missed the mark on that. Yeah.
2 weeks on that. Great. I'm glad you have some insights there.
Exactly. Which, if you can lead the conversation into that's interesting. Now what are we going to do about
that's
it?
Fine.
That's great. But having that expectation in the beginning, set from the beginning, is really, really important.
Love that. And it's also more motivation for you and the team behind it, knowing that there's going to be an outcome either way.
Right? Yes,
exactly. It's
exactly.
going to get used, or we're going to learn something and adapt, whatever it may be.
Yeah, you got it.
Not just doing work towards no end goal, which would be very, I wouldn't be that engaged.
Right. Exactly right.
I know we're short on time, so I just wanted to share one of the things that really always makes me smile when in our conversations offline is how you use the work and your expertise with people analytics in your personal life and some of the projects that you've embarked on. One of those being Nanny Navigator. This is really random for everyone listening, but I think it's a pretty cool story. So I'm going to ask Michael to share. What is Nanny Navigator and how did that come to be?
So this will give those listening an insight into exactly how nerdy I am. And my wife always tells people, you're way nerdier now than when I met you, which is absolutely true, by the way.
Compliment. I'll take it as a compliment.
I do too. So Nanny Navigator was really born from, so as I mentioned on the beginning of this call, we have a 3-year-old daughter at home. And when she was first born, we're fortunate enough to be able to have a nanny come to the house and look after her. My wife and I both work full time. So that was the solution that we decided to embark on. And we hired some nannies from various different places, and they didn't work out for whatever various reasons. And there was one in particular that was just a bad situation. I'm not going to go into the details here, but it really sparked in me a change to say, look, and I happened to be going through my PhD program at the exact same time this happened. And I happened to be in a class all about assessments and creating assessments and all these things. So it's like the universe aligned itself so well. And I said, look, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I created an assessment called Nanny Navigator that it takes really the parents of the child would fill out a form, and it's basically a list of adjectives that you would use to describe someone, and they would select those top adjectives that they want to find in a nanny. The second piece to that is then the nanny takes a personality type assessment, and it's on a scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Those things, I've then written an algorithm in the background to match the parents' needs and the nanny's results, and match those things up to say where are the areas of greatest overlap, so things where we agree on and where the nanny is in terms of personality type, and where are those things where we have the biggest gaps. And it provides a chart so you can see kind of where are those gaps. And then it provides the family with interview questions that they can ask in order to get under why there might be gaps in those various different areas, because there might be various good reasons why there are gaps, but you're going to want to ask those questions from the nanny as you go through the interview process. And it gives the family things to listen for and the answers based on how the nanny
That's so
scored and
cool.
those gaps and those things. So
Yeah.
it's really a way to take this assessment methodology and apply it to a personal situation that clearly, I mean, my children are
Gonna
the
be
world
more
to me.
important, right? The safety and the well-being of your
Absolutely.
children. You know,
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
get much more
exactly.
important than that.
Yeah.
I love the fact that, you know, obviously both your parent side, nan side, and then it obviously gives you the questions, and, you know, as it recommends the questions based on that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, as a parent myself, that's amazing to have. And you said, you know, you looked out there wasn't anything like that out there, which it seems
Yeah,
pretty crazy that only
exactly.
exists as a product.
Yeah,
So
and it's really kind of a bit of an untapped market, and there's really not been a whole lot of research done around nannies. There's some around caregivers and those kinds of things, but the environment in which people work in someone else's home really does have a difference on how they interact and those kinds of things. So
that's pretty
it was
cool.
yeah, it's neat. It's neat.
Can people get hold of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying
Through
to find it out there.
yeah, either direct message me on LinkedIn if you want
Hold
to,
of it.
or Cherry Tree Analytics is a
Yeah.
place where you can get it. .com is the website.
At your website. All right, perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah. I just love those examples. There's a few others that I know you have, and a lot of your peers, the amount of times they say, Chris, I use this to build this assessment for something personal. I'm just like, wow, the ability
yeah,
to be able to transition and do that, and then have, and did that, I'm assuming that helped you get a good nanny then. Are you
yeah,
happy?
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we have the best. She's like Mary Poppins. It's wonderful.
How was the nanny when you was like, here's this assessment I want you to take? What was the
Um,
reaction there?
I mean, here's my perspective. If you're afraid to take it, that's probably a red flag in and of itself.
That's true.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we can explain why and all these kinds of things, but in my opinion, we're going to be open and honest with that person as we're hiring them to take care of our children, and we want the same from that person. So, on our next chat, we'll talk about my Dancing with the Stars algorithm. That's another
Oh
fun.
yeah, that's a
Yeah,
whole other story.
yeah, exactly.
Algorithm, yeah. Well,
You
listen,
got
I
it.
need to let you go. I know you got to go, Michael. But thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
Glad
Thank
to have
you.
you on the show, and we'll catch up again soon. But, you know, enjoy the rest of your evening, and yeah, it was a great,
That
great
sounds
speaking with
great.
you.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you, and congrats on the success of your summit and all of that. That's wonderful. I'm
thank you. We
super
want to work
super happy for you.
about you and Wendy and everyone else that, you know, contribute. So, and everyone
Yeah,
else on LinkedIn. That's what it's really all about. We're trying our
that's
best,
right.
especially during this time, right? Just
Totally.
to provide as
Yeah.
much value and insight and connect as many people as possible. Because now more than ever, we need to stick together.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, well, look, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch up
Perfect.
with you soon. All
All
right,
right.
see you
Take care.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. All right. Bye-bye.